In the peaceful suburban neighborhood of Willow Ridge, life seemed picturesque, as if painted on a canvas with bright, inviting strokes. Here, neatly trimmed lawns lined the streets, and houses with carefully designed facades boasted picket fences and flower beds in full bloom. Willow Ridge was the kind of place that families dreamed of, a place where neighbors exchanged warm greetings and children played freely in the safety of quiet cul-de-sacs. In the upscale, picture-perfect neighborhood of Willow Ridge, Jay and Aisha had finally found the home of their dreams. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a place to build a life together, free from the shadows of judgment. But within days of their move, the cracks began to show. A brutal murder shocks the neighborhood, and whispers of prejudice and hidden secrets swirl around them. The very community they long to belong to starts to feel like a trap, with every neighbor watching and every door hiding something sinister. As Jay and Aisha dig deeper, they uncover something far darker than they could have imagined, a truth that could shatter Willow Ridge's polished facade and endanger everything they hold dear. Among those dreaming of a home in Willow Ridge were Jay and Aisha Roberts, a young black couple full of hopes and aspirations. They had worked tirelessly to save for a down payment on their first home, pouring every spare dollar into the goal of one day owning a piece of this peaceful paradise. Jay, a software developer, had spent years climbing the ranks at his tech firm, while Aisha, a social worker, dedicated her days to helping underprivileged families navigate life's challenges. Together, they had built a life centered on values of hard work, respect, and unity. Finally, after years of saving and sacrificing, the day had come for them to begin their search in earnest. Aisha could barely contain her excitement as they drove toward Willow Ridge, her fingers dancing across her phone screen as she scrolled through listings of homes they'd earmarked to view. "Can you believe it, Jay? Our own place. Imagine all the things we could do." She beamed, glancing at him with a spark in her eyes that Jay found contagious. Jay smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "It's going to be everything we've dreamed of, babe. We'll finally have our own little corner of the world, just us, and our future." The first home on their list had been recommended by a well-known local realtor, Veronica. She had a reputation for working with high-profile clients and a history of quick sales. When Aisha first reached out, Ms. Veronica had been polite, but somewhat curt, dismissing many of the properties Aisha suggested as unsuitable for a couple like them. But Aisha brushed it off, attributing it to the realtor's professional, no-nonsense style. After all, she was a respected figure in real estate. If anyone could help them find the perfect home, it would be her. As they pulled up to Ms. Veronica's office, a quaint but modern brick building nestled between two upscale boutiques, Aisha took a deep breath. The excitement bubbling inside her made her fingers tremble slightly as they locked hands and stepped inside. The receptionist smiled and gestured to a nearby waiting area, directing them to a plush seating arrangement. After a few minutes, Ms. Veronica appeared, dressed in a crisp blazer and heels that clicked sharply on the tiled floor. She was tall and elegant, with an air of confidence that seemed almost rehearsed. Her smile was polite, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She extended her hand toward Jay and Aisha with a measured friendliness that felt slightly forced. "So the Roberts," she began, flipping through a tablet as she sat down across from them. "You're looking for your first home here in Willow Ridge, correct?" "Yes," Jay responded, his excitement evident. "We've been planning for this a long time." Ms. Veronica nodded. "I'm sure you have. And I understand you're specifically interested in the Willow Ridge area?" "Exactly," Aisha added, her voice filled with anticipation. "We've looked at a few places online and even drove around the neighborhood. It's everything we've been hoping for." A faint, almost imperceptible shadow crossed Ms. Veronica's face. She gave a thin-lipped smile and continued, "Willow Ridge is certainly a unique community. Now, I've taken the liberty of selecting a few properties for you that I think you'll find suitable." Jay and Aisha exchanged glances. They had a list of their own but decided to go with the flow. Ms. Veronica handed them her tablet, showing them the first house on her list. a charming two-story cottage with a spacious backyard and a wraparound porch. The price, however, was notably higher than other listings they had seen for similar properties. Jay noticed it immediately. This house seems a bit pricier than the ones we looked at online. Are there any specific features that set it apart? Ms. Veronica's smile tightened slightly. Quality is everything in Willow Ridge. You'll find that certain properties come with a premium, especially for a neighborhood as exclusive as this one. The term exclusive lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Aisha felt an uncomfortable prickling sensation, but pushed it aside, convincing herself it was just the stress of such a significant purchase. "Oh, of course. We're just very conscious of our budget," Aisha replied, her voice softening as she considered their finances. Ms. Veronica nodded, her expression neutral. "I understand. Budget is always a concern. I can show you a few other properties that may be more accessible." There it was again, the subtle, loaded language that somehow placed an invisible barrier between them and the dream they had worked so hard to attain. Still, they soldiered on, determined not to let anything dampen their excitement. They spent the rest of the afternoon touring homes with Ms. Veronica, who seemed to guide them toward the more modest areas of Willow Ridge. The homes were nice, but not quite the dream they had envisioned, a little smaller, a little less updated. By the end of the day, exhaustion had begun to set in. Jay and Aisha thanked Ms. Veronica for her time and assured her they would be in touch. As they walked back to their car, Jay slipped his arm around Aisha's shoulders. "Do you think she seemed a little off?" Aisha shrugged, resting her head against his shoulder. "Maybe she just thinks we're not serious buyers. But we'll show her, right? We're going to find our perfect home here, one way or another." Jay smiled, pulling her close. "Absolutely, babe. We'll get it. We always do." They shared a determined glance, the resolve in their eyes solidifying their commitment. Whatever obstacles lay ahead, Jay and Aisha were ready to face them together, armed with love, grit, and an unshakable belief in their right to belong. The next day, Jay and Aisha returned to Willow Ridge, feeling a renewed sense of hope. They had reviewed their budget overnight and were determined to make their dream a reality. But the subtle discomfort from their last meeting with Ms. Veronica still lingered in Aisha's mind. She shrugged it off, reminding herself that finding a home was bound to be stressful. As they arrived at the first house on today's list, Ms. Veronica was already there, standing beside her sleek car. Her professional smile flickered briefly as they approached, and she launched into a detailed description of the home's exterior features, pointing to the freshly painted shutters and pristine landscaping. "This property," she explained, gesturing with polished nails, "has a lovely yard and a basement that could be perfect for additional storage or a home gym. A little high on the price range, but it's what Willow Ridge demands." Aisha's gaze swept over the house. It was beautiful, but something seemed off. The yard was neat, but the house felt impersonal, like a showroom rather than a home. And while Ms. Veronica had mentioned the basement as a perk, there was no mention of the interior features that would matter to them, like the living room layout or the kitchen space. She tried to focus, listening as Ms. Veronica went on about the neighborhood's desirable demographics, a phrase that caught Jay's attention. "What exactly do you mean by desirable demographics?" he asked, his voice polite but tinged with curiosity. Ms. Veronica paused, her smile tightening ever so slightly. "Well, you know, Willow Ridge is known for its certain standards, the kind of place that fosters community values. It's not a place for just anyone." Her gaze lingered on them just for a moment too long, before she turned back to the house with an air of dismissal. Aisha felt a quiet unease creep over her, but before she could say anything, Ms. Veronica motioned them toward the door and unlocked it, holding it open for them to step inside. As they toured the house, Jay's mind replayed Ms. Veronica's words. Community values, not just anyone. He glanced at Aisha, who seemed lost in thought. her brows slightly furrowed as she inspected the kitchen. The house was lovely, with high ceilings and wide windows that filled the rooms with natural light. But it wasn't exactly what they were looking for, and even though they hadn't mentioned this to Ms. Veronica, she had already penciled in other properties that felt less suitable for a young couple planning a future. They wrapped up the tour, and Ms. Veronica led them outside, where she handed them a printout with the price details. The numbers stared back at them, significantly higher than they expected. Jay looked up. "I thought we agreed on a different budget." Ms. Veronica's smile didn't falter. "I assure you, this home is worth every penny. This isn't an area where you want to settle for anything below par. Trust me, you'll be grateful for the investment." Aisha bit her lip, feeling the tension in the air thickening. "We're not settling," she replied gently. "We just need something that fits us." "Of course," Ms. Veronica replied smoothly, but her tone held a faint edge. "But understand, not every property in Willow Ridge can suit everyone." The words stung. She was careful, not outright denying them, but the implication sat heavy. Aisha and Jay exchanged a look, the kind of look that held unspoken questions and unsteady emotions. Ms. Veronica's words, so carefully chosen, were starting to feel like subtle nudges away from their dreams rather than toward them. After they left, the couple returned to their car, sitting in silence for a moment, each lost in thought. Jay finally broke the silence, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. "I don't know, Aisha. Something doesn't feel right. It's like she's pushing us toward places she thinks we should want, instead of the ones we actually do." Aisha sighed, looking out the window as she collected her thoughts. "I feel it too. It's almost like she's guiding us toward the edge of Willow Ridge, keeping us away from the center, like she's hoping we'll settle for something just outside our dream." Jay nodded, his jaw tightening. "I think we need to keep an eye on her, and maybe look up some of these listings on our own." They spent the rest of the day driving through Willow Ridge without Ms. Veronica, taking note of the houses that fit their vision of a family home. Each property they saw felt more like the future they wanted, but as they went through listings, something odd caught their attention. A few of the properties Ms. Veronica had shown them had notably different prices than what they had found online. Jay's brow furrowed as he compared the numbers, disbelief washing over him. "Aisha, look at this. These are listed way lower than what she told us." Aisha leaned over, scanning the numbers on his phone screen. "This doesn't make any sense, unless—" Their eyes met, realization sinking in. The weight of it felt shocking, a betrayal they hadn't anticipated. Was she trying to price them out, to make them doubt they could afford what they'd worked so hard for? A surge of determination welled up in Aisha. "We're not going to let her get in our way, Jay. We've come too far to be turned around now." Jay took her hand, his expression steely. "Then let's keep going, but on our terms." They drove on, no longer just hopeful buyers, but determined to uncover the truth behind the houses and the realtor they had entrusted with their dreams. The following day, Jay and Aisha met early at a cozy coffee shop just outside Willow Ridge. With their laptops open and papers spread out, they dove into research mode, each armed with a fresh sense of purpose. If Ms. Veronica was trying to steer them off course, they weren't going to make it easy for her. Jay had spent part of the previous night tracking down information on the houses Ms. Veronica had shown them. To his surprise, each property had been listed online for thousands less than the prices she had quoted. It felt like a slap in the face. Ms. Veronica, the professional they'd trusted, was not only misleading them, but doing so with a level of deceit that seemed calculated. Aisha scrolled through an online forum for local buyers, hoping to find advice on navigating the Willow Ridge market. Her attention was drawn to a post from someone who described a similar experience with a realtor, subtly guided away from their ideal neighborhood and encouraged to settle for a property that felt less than ideal. Her heart skipped a beat as she read on, the realtor's description sounding eerily similar to Ms. Veronica's. "Jay, listen to this," Aisha said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This person was looking for a place in Willow Ridge, too. Their realtor was pushing them toward lower value areas. It sounds exactly like what we're going through. Jay leaned in, reading over her shoulder. It's almost like she's curating her clients, deciding who deserves to live where. But why go to all this trouble, and how's she getting away with it? Aisha took a deep breath, shaking her head. I don't know. But we're not about to become just another story. We've worked too hard to be dismissed like this. With their resolve strengthening, Jay and Aisha decided it was time to take matters into their own hands. Instead of waiting for Ms. Veronica's calls, they arranged viewings for some properties that fit their budget and vision. These homes were similar to the ones she had shown them, but were priced much more reasonably, proof that her guidance had been far from honest. That afternoon, they toured one of these properties on their own. It was a beautiful, spacious home with large windows and a backyard that felt like a private oasis. Standing in the empty living room, Aisha could practically picture their lives unfolding here. Family dinners, laughter, quiet mornings over coffee. It felt like the kind of place where they could build the life they'd dreamed of. I could see us here, she whispered, her voice carrying a sense of reverence. Jay nodded, taking it all in. This is what we've been looking for. It's everything we wanted. For a moment, they allowed themselves to revel in the possibility. But as much as they loved the house, the shadow of Ms. Veronica's manipulation hung over them. They couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she'd been trying to drive them away from homes just like this one. But why? What did she gain from deceiving them? As they stepped back outside, Jay's phone buzzed with a message from Ms. Veronica. Ms. Veronica, good afternoon. I've found a few new listings I think might interest you. Let me know if you'd like to schedule a tour. Jay shared the message with Aisha, a skeptical frown forming on his face. I wonder what listings she's talking about now. Probably more overpriced houses she thinks we'll settle for. Aisha crossed her arms, her gaze fixed in thought. I think it's time we played along, but we do it carefully. That evening, they decided to go along with Ms. Veronica's game, agreeing to meet her for another tour. This time, though, they would be watching closely, taking note of every detail, every subtle push away from their dream and toward what she wanted them to choose. The next morning, they met Ms. Veronica at a high-end listing. It was a large home with more space than they needed, in a section of Willow Ridge that carried a steep price tag. While the house was lovely, it felt like an ill fit for them, too grand, too impersonal. Ms. Veronica, however, sang its praises with an enthusiasm she had never shown for any other home they'd seen. This property is an absolute gem, she gushed, leading them through the lavishly furnished rooms. With a few upgrades, you'd really be set here. Aisha listened politely, but she couldn't ignore the rising discomfort. This wasn't just any house, it was almost deliberately wrong for them. The price, the size, everything about it felt like an attempt to price them out of Willow Ridge altogether. Jay, sensing the same undercurrent, decided to confront her in a way that didn't give too much away. We've noticed a lot of the homes you're showing us are at the higher end of our budget. Are there any that might be a bit more affordable? Ms. Veronica's face softened, but her response was swift. I wouldn't want you to settle, especially in a community like this. These are the properties that will give you the lifestyle you're after. There it was again, that subtle insinuation that they didn't quite belong, that the only way they could live in Willow Ridge was if they stretched beyond their means. As they wrapped up the tour, Ms. Veronica handed them another printout, the price higher than even the last. Jay and Aisha exchanged a glance, their suspicions solidifying into something undeniable. Ms. Veronica wasn't just ignoring their budget, she was actively manipulating it, hoping they'd walk away feeling defeated. After they left, Jay took Aisha's hand, his tone determined. She's trying to drive us out. I can feel it, but we're not backing down. Aisha nodded, a fire in her eyes. We'll keep looking, and we'll find our home here. But first, I think it's time to let her know we're onto her. With a shared determination, they walked away, prepared to face whatever Ms. Veronica threw at them next, but this time on their own terms. The following day, Jay and Aisha met Ms. Veronica at yet another property, determined to get answers. This time, they decided to lay their cards on the table and confront her subtle manipulations head-on. As they arrived, Ms. Veronica was already waiting, her usual polite but detached smile in place. This house was modest compared to the last few, a single-story ranch-style home tucked into a quiet, less desirable part of Willow Ridge. The location felt isolated, as though it had been deliberately chosen to separate them from the vibrant community they had envisioned. "Good morning," Ms. Veronica greeted them brightly, ushering them inside with a practiced wave of her hand. "I think this home will be a better match, given some of your concerns." Aisha's brows knitted together, detecting the condescension lurking beneath Ms. Veronica's words. But she held her tongue, determined to approach this carefully. As they toured the house, Jay examined the printout Ms. Veronica handed them, eyeing the price skeptically. It was higher than expected for this side of Willow Ridge, but not quite as inflated as the previous listings. Still, it was clear Ms. Veronica was manipulating the figures. He glanced over at Aisha, who gave a subtle nod, encouraging him to speak up. "Ms. Veronica," Jay started, his tone calm but firm, "we did some research on a few of the homes you showed us. We noticed that the prices were significantly different from what you quoted. Can you help us understand that?" Ms. Veronica's smile tightened, and her eyes flickered briefly with irritation before she regained her composure. "Real estate pricing can be quite variable, Jay. Many factors go into determining the final price: demand, community standards, quality. Willow Ridge is a highly desirable area, so prices reflect that." Aisha took a step closer, refusing to let her brush them off. "We understand that, but we found some discrepancies, thousands of dollars worth, in fact. It's almost like the prices you're showing us are meant to deter us from buying here." Ms. Veronica's mask cracked, just for an instant, as a flicker of annoyance crossed her face. She let out a soft, forced laugh, smoothing her hair as though to regain control of the situation. "Now, Aisha, please don't misunderstand me," she said, her voice laced with a patronizing edge. "My only goal is to ensure that you find a home where you'll feel comfortable. Willow Ridge is a unique community, and it's not just about affordability. It's about finding a place that aligns with your values." Jay clenched his jaw, his patience wearing thin. "Ms. Veronica, with all due respect, we're capable of determining where we feel comfortable. We chose Willow Ridge because it represents everything we're looking for. It feels like you're pushing us toward properties we didn't ask for." Ms. Veronica raised her hands defensively, her smile a brittle facade. "I'm merely suggesting homes that I believe are suitable for you. The last thing I would want is for you to be disappointed." A tense silence settled over them, the weight of her words hanging thick in the air, the undercurrent of exclusion, the carefully chosen phrases, the barely veiled condescension. It all became crystal clear. Ms. Veronica wasn't just guiding them toward properties. She was steering them away from others. Aisha felt a surge of frustration, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "We're looking for a home that's right for us, Ms. Veronica, not one you think is suitable. We've worked hard to be here, and we deserve the same opportunities as anyone else." For the first time, Ms. Veronica's composure faltered. She glanced away, her fingers tightening around her tablet as she quickly composed herself. Of course," she replied, her tone brisk, but her eyes had lost their usual polite gleam. "I'll make a note of your preferences and see if I can find something more fitting." With that, she pivoted sharply, leading them out of the house. Her demeanor had changed, her warmth replaced by a barely hidden frustration that Jay and Aisha had dared to question her authority. She was no longer masking her intentions with thinly veiled smiles and evasive words. She was frustrated, perhaps even threatened by their persistence. As they left the property, Jay and Aisha shared a look of shared understanding. This wasn't just a matter of finding the right home. It was now about proving that they deserved to live wherever they chose, regardless of Ms. Veronica's outdated biases. In the car, Aisha let out a long sigh, finally allowing her frustration to surface. "She's not even trying to hide it anymore, Jay. Did you see her face when we called her out? She actually looked angry." Jay nodded, his expression serious. "She's trying to gatekeep Willow Ridge, deciding who belongs and who doesn't, but we're not going to let her push us out." Aisha's eyes sparkled with determination. "Exactly, and if she thinks she can intimidate us, she's wrong. We're finding a home here, Jay, and we'll make sure it's one we chose, not one she thinks is suitable for us." With their determination renewed, they knew it was time to consider the next steps. Ms. Veronica's true intentions had been laid bare, and they were ready to go further to ensure she couldn't control their choices. For Jay and Aisha, this journey had become more than just a search for a home. It had become a stand against discrimination, and they were prepared to face it head-on. The following day, Jay and Aisha decided it was time to reach out for advice. Ms. Veronica's behavior had crossed the line from subtle manipulation to outright obstruction, and they felt the need to seek guidance. Over breakfast, they discussed their options, knowing that finding someone who understood their experience would be essential. "Do you think we should go to the Willow Ridge housing office?" Aisha asked, swirling her coffee absent-mindedly. "Maybe they'd know if other people have had similar issues." Jay nodded, considering it. "It's worth a try, but I was thinking we should also talk to someone who knows real estate laws, just in case we need to go further." That afternoon, they drove to the local housing office, a modest brick building tucked into the heart of the Willow Ridge business district. Inside, the atmosphere was quiet and orderly. After a short wait, they met with a representative, Mrs. Clark, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile and a kind demeanor. As they described their experience, Mrs. Clark listened intently, her expression growing increasingly concerned as they recounted Ms. Veronica's manipulative tactics. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair, folding her hands thoughtfully. "This isn't the first time I've heard complaints about Ms. Veronica," she admitted, glancing over a file on her desk. "There have been other buyers who felt similarly pressured. Some of them left Willow Ridge altogether, thinking they couldn't afford the area. It's subtle but persistent. Always those little nudges that make buyers feel unwelcome." Aisha's eyes widened, a mix of anger and sadness building within her. "So it's a pattern. She's done this to others too." Mrs. Clark nodded, her voice laced with empathy. "I'm afraid so. She has a particular influence here, with a reputation for working with high-end clients and maintaining a certain standard in the community. Most people don't question her because she's seen as one of the best, but her practices have been an open secret for a while now." Jay took a deep breath, his frustration evident. "So she's basically been controlling who gets to live here, and no one has challenged her." Mrs. Clark sighed. "It's not that simple, unfortunately. Complaints have been made, but proving discrimination in real estate can be complicated. It often boils down to your word against hers. Without solid evidence, it's challenging to take formal action. But, if you're serious, I can refer you to someone who might be able to help." She handed them a business card for a local real estate lawyer, a Mr. Lawson, who specialized in cases involving housing discrimination. Thanking Mrs. Clark, Jay and Aisha left the office feeling both validated and disturbed. They weren't alone in their experience, but that knowledge only deepened their resolve. Later that day, they scheduled an appointment with Mr. Lawson. The lawyer's office was cozy but professional, with bookshelves lined with legal texts and documents. Mr. Lawson, a soft-spoken man with a calm and reassuring demeanor, welcomed them warmly. As they relayed the details of their interactions with Ms. Veronica, he listened carefully, taking notes, and occasionally asking questions to clarify specifics. When they finished, he leaned back, nodding thoughtfully. "It sounds like Ms. Veronica is engaging in what we call steering," he explained. "This is a practice where realtors attempt to guide clients of certain backgrounds towards specific neighborhoods or properties based on stereotypes or biases. It's illegal, but it's also challenging to prove without substantial evidence." Aisha's shoulders slumped slightly. So we're stuck? We know what she's doing, but we don't have any proof. Not necessarily, Mr. Lawson replied, his tone encouraging. If you're willing, we can start gathering evidence. Record your interactions with her, take notes on every conversation, and document any discrepancies in property pricing. This way, you'll have a record if it ever comes to a formal complaint. Jay glanced at Aisha, then back at Mr. Lawson, a spark of determination in his eyes. We're in. Whatever it takes, we're ready to make it happen. With Mr. Lawson's guidance, they left the office feeling empowered, with a clear plan to gather the evidence they needed. For the first time in days, Jay and Aisha felt a sense of control. They were no longer helplessly caught in Ms. Veronica's web of subtle prejudice. Now they had the tools to expose it. As they drove back to Willow Ridge, Jay looked over at Aisha, a renewed sense of hope filling his heart. We're going to do this, Aisha, not just for us but for anyone else who's had to deal with people like her. Aisha nodded, her eyes shining with resolve. Absolutely. If she thinks she can decide who belongs here, she's wrong. We're proving her wrong, for everyone. They spent the evening documenting every interaction they'd had with Ms. Veronica, listing out each instance of her manipulation and the inflated pricing. With every word they wrote, the weight of their frustration began to lift, replaced by a fierce determination to see this through. In the days that followed, they continued looking at properties, both with and without Ms. Veronica's assistance. Each time they met her, they followed Mr. Lawson's advice, recording conversations when possible and documenting every inconsistency. The evidence began to pile up, each piece building a case against her, and with each new finding, their confidence grew. For Jay and Aisha, the journey was no longer just about finding a home. It was about claiming their right to live where they chose, free from the constraints of someone else's prejudiced perspective. They were ready to challenge the status quo and make Willow Ridge a place that truly welcomed everyone. As Jay and Aisha continued their journey, they began to see just how deep Ms. Veronica's influence over the housing market in Willow Ridge ran. Despite the setbacks, they were more determined than ever to build their case. Over the next week, they followed Mr. Lawson's advice, meticulously gathering evidence and seeking more information about other potential buyers affected by Ms. Veronica's tactics. One evening, while scrolling through a local social media page dedicated to Willow Ridge, Aisha stumbled upon a post from a young couple who had moved to a neighboring area after a similarly disheartening experience. The post mentioned how they had been guided away from Willow Ridge by their realtor, who subtly implied that they wouldn't fit in the neighborhood. The couple, unsure of their options, had ultimately purchased a home outside of Willow Ridge, feeling both unwelcome and defeated. Aisha quickly messaged them, introducing herself and explaining her and Jay's own experience with Ms. Veronica. Within minutes, the couple, Matt and Layla, responded, eagerly agreeing to meet and share their story. Jay and Aisha arranged to meet them the following day at a nearby cafe. The next afternoon, they gathered around a small table by the window, the warm light of the setting sun casting a comforting glow over them. Matt, a young teacher, and Layla, an artist, recounted their experience with their realtor, an eerily familiar story of subtly inflated prices, dismissive comments, and an unmistakable push toward more suitable neighborhoods. We were ready to settle down there, Matt explained, frustration evident in his voice. But it felt like every option we had was being blocked. We started to feel like maybe we were aiming too high, like we didn't belong. Layla nodded, her voice quiet but firm. It's easy to doubt yourself when someone keeps suggesting you should look elsewhere. We wanted Willow Ridge, but by the end, we felt unwanted. So we gave up. We found a place nearby, but it wasn't the dream we had in mind. Jay leaned forward, his voice gentle but filled with resolve. We know exactly how that feels, but we're not giving up. We're building a case, and we could use more stories like yours. If you're willing, we'd like to include what happened to you as evidence. Matt and Layla exchanged a look, a shared understanding passing between them. Matt finally nodded, his voice filled with determination. Absolutely. If it means someone else won't go through what we did, we're in. Layla gave a small smile, reaching out to squeeze Aisha's hand. It's time someone held these people accountable. Over the next few days, Jay and Aisha's network grew. They connected with other families who had experienced similar situations. Some pushed toward less desirable properties, others discouraged by pricing discrepancies that made their dreams seem out of reach. Each story added another layer to the case, building a clear pattern of discrimination. One evening, as they sat in their living room surrounded by notes and documents, Aisha let out a sigh, leaning back against the couch. It's amazing. We thought it was just us. But there are so many people affected by her behavior. Jay nodded, a mix of sadness and determination on his face. And who knows how many more there are who just walked away without saying anything. Ms. Veronica has probably been getting away with this for years. Their growing collection of evidence painted a disturbing picture, a realtor manipulating the housing market to preserve her own vision of Willow Ridge, gatekeeping the neighborhood under the guise of suitability. But the more they learned, the more Jay and Aisha realized they weren't alone. Each new story strengthened their case, creating a web of experiences that all pointed back to Ms. Veronica's influence. Their next step was to meet with Mr. Lawson to review the progress they had made. They arranged a meeting at his office, bringing along the stack of documents, testimonies, and recordings they had collected. Mr. Lawson was impressed, his eyes widening as he reviewed the meticulous records and accounts they'd gathered. "This is substantial," he said, nodding in approval. "You've done an incredible job putting this together. With this much evidence, we can file a formal complaint and request an investigation into her practices." Aisha's heart swelled with hope. "Do you think we have a chance, that we could actually stop her from doing this?" Mr. Lawson smiled, his voice reassuring. "You've done more than enough. You've turned what could have been dismissed as an isolated complaint into a pattern of misconduct. This is exactly the kind of case that gets results." Jay exhaled, relief flooding over him. "We couldn't have done it without your guidance. Thank you, Mr. Lawson." "You're the ones who took action," Mr. Lawson replied, his tone respectful. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about every family she's kept from their dreams. You're giving a voice to everyone who felt they didn't belong because of someone else's prejudice." Leaving Mr. Lawson's office, Jay and Aisha felt a weight lift from their shoulders. Their journey was far from over, but they had taken the first significant step toward justice. They had found allies in their fight, and with each story they uncovered, they felt their own resolve strengthen. For Jay and Aisha, this wasn't just about buying a house anymore. It was about redefining what it meant to be part of a community. With their case formally filed and their evidence submitted, they returned home that evening, knowing that they had given their all to this fight. Willow Ridge was their dream, and they were ready to see it through, not just for themselves, but for everyone else who had felt sidelined and silenced. Now, it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. Days passed, and Jay and Aisha began to sense a shift in the air around Willow Ridge. Word of their complaint and the mounting evidence against Ms. Veronica had started to spread. At first, the changes were subtle, a few knowing looks from other realtors, whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when Jay or Aisha walked into a room. But as the ripple effects grew, so did the sense of anticipation. Their complaint had sparked an official investigation into Ms. Veronica's practices, with the Housing Board conducting discreet inquiries into her past transactions. Jay and Aisha knew that it would take time, but even this small victory felt monumental. They had dared to challenge the very person who controlled their dreams, and now, for the first time, her power was being questioned. One afternoon, as Aisha was working from home, her phone buzzed with a text from Layla, the artist they had met. "Check the Willow Ridge community page. There's something you need to see." Curious, Aisha opened the page and scrolled through recent posts. To her surprise, she saw that several people were sharing experiences remarkably similar to her and Jay's, stories of inflated prices, of homes mysteriously unavailable, of gentle suggestions that they might be happier elsewhere. One post, written by a young black couple, describe Ms. Veronica's subtle but insistent discouragement of their desire to live in Willow Ridge, suggesting a nearby neighborhood instead. Aisha quickly called Jay, who was on his lunch break at work. "You won't believe this," she said, her excitement barely contained. "People are speaking out. It's all over the community page. Ms. Veronica's other clients. People who left because they felt unwelcome. It's like a floodgate has opened." Jay's voice was filled with amazement. "It's finally happening, Aisha. We're not alone in this anymore." Over the next few days, more and more stories came to light. As former clients shared their experiences, a troubling pattern emerged, not just isolated instances of discrimination, but a clear history of Ms. Veronica guiding buyers away from Willow Ridge. The posts attracted attention, and soon the local news caught wind of the growing controversy. One evening, a news segment aired, covering the allegations against Ms. Veronica. The camera zoomed in on the Willow Ridge neighborhood as the reporter recounted stories of inflated prices, discriminatory comments, and quiet nudges meant to steer certain buyers away. The segment ended with a statement from the Housing Board, confirming that an official investigation was underway. Jay and Aisha watched in awe, realizing that their voices had set something much larger in motion. "I can't believe this is happening," Aisha said, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We started this, Jay. We actually started this." Jay wrapped his arm around her shoulders, a mixture of pride and relief on his face. It was long overdue. No one deserves to be told they don't belong. The impact of the investigation began to hit Ms. Veronica hard. A few days after the news segment aired, Jay received a call from Mrs. Clark, the representative at the Willow Ridge housing office, who had initially connected them with Mr. Lawson. "Jay," she said, her voice filled with empathy, "I thought you'd want to know. Ms. Veronica's reputation has taken a serious hit. Her clients are starting to back out, and there are whispers that her license may be in jeopardy." Jay felt a surge of satisfaction, but kept his voice calm. "Thank you, Mrs. Clark. It means a lot to us to hear that." As he hung up, Jay shared the news with Aisha, who couldn't help but smile. "It's finally catching up with her. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost." But Ms. Veronica's troubles were far from over. With mounting pressure from the community and clients pulling away, she made a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation. Jay and Aisha received an unexpected email from her office, requesting a meeting to clear up any misunderstandings. They agreed to meet her, knowing this could be their chance to confront her in a way they hadn't been able to before. The next day, they arrived at Ms. Veronica's office, their emotions a mix of anticipation and resolve. When she greeted them, it was clear her confidence had taken a hit. The usually polished and composed Realtor seemed flustered, her movements tense and uncharacteristically uncertain. "Thank you for coming," Ms. Veronica began, her voice measured but lacking its usual edge. "I wanted to address any grievances you might have." Aisha raised an eyebrow, exchanging a look with Jay. "Grievances? Ms. Veronica, this isn't just about grievances. You've been manipulating prices and steering people away based on nothing but your own biases." Ms. Veronica's expression tightened. "I assure you, any actions I took were simply to maintain the character of Willow Ridge. I've worked hard to build a community here that—" Jay interrupted, his voice firm but controlled. "A community that you control, you mean. You decide who fits and who doesn't, without any regard for who people actually are. We're not here to listen to justifications, Ms. Veronica. We're here to let you know that what you did was wrong." A flicker of anger crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with a thin smile. "I understand you're upset. Perhaps I was too selective in my methods, but surely we can resolve this without further harm to my reputation." Aisha's voice was calm but resolute. "This isn't about your reputation. It's about every family you kept from their dream because of your narrow view of who deserves to live here." For the first time, Ms. Veronica seemed to falter, her usual poise slipping away entirely. She looked at them, searching for words but finding none. Jay and Aisha stood their ground, their expressions unwavering. Finally, she managed a hollow apology. I'm sorry if you felt excluded. That was never my intention." Jay and Aisha exchanged a look, a silent agreement that they had heard all they needed to. Without another word, they turned and left the office, leaving Ms. Veronica behind to face the consequences of her actions. Outside, they took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure settle over them. The path they had chosen was far from easy, but it had been worth every step. As they walked away, Aisha glanced at Jay, a small smile playing on her lips. "We did it. We finally did it." Jay nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "And it's not just for us. It's for everyone who ever thought they didn't belong." Their actions had sparked a change that would resonate far beyond Willow Ridge. Together, they had taken a stand, and in doing so, they had made a difference, not just for themselves, but for all those who dared to dream. In the days following their confrontation with Ms. Veronica, Jay and Aisha were overwhelmed by the support that poured in from the community. Messages of encouragement flooded their inbox, and people they'd never met stopped them in public, sharing stories and expressing gratitude. Willow Ridge, once a place they had felt subtly pushed away from, now felt like a welcoming embrace. One evening, while relaxing at home, Jay received a phone call from a number he didn't recognize. He answered, and on the other end was Mr. Graham, a well-respected community leader and local business owner who had been watching the events unfold closely. "Jay," Mr. Graham began warmly, "I just wanted to commend you and Aisha for your bravery. Taking a stand like this isn't easy. You've shown all of us what it means to fight for what's right." Jay was taken aback by the call. "Thank you, Mr. Graham. It wasn't just about us. It was about everyone Ms. Veronica had hurt. No one should be told they don't belong somewhere." Mr. Graham chuckled, a fatherly tone in his voice. "Exactly, and that's why I wanted to reach out. We're organizing a community meeting, and I'd love for you and Aisha to attend. We want to discuss ways to ensure that Willow Ridge is welcoming to everyone, that no one else has to go through what you did." Jay agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. He shared the news with Aisha, and together they prepared to attend the meeting, eager to meet others who wanted to create lasting change. The meeting was held in a local community center, and when they arrived, Jay and Aisha were amazed by the turnout. People from all walks of life had gathered, their faces eager and hopeful. Some were familiar faces from the stories shared online, others were new, curious to learn more and to show their support. As Mr. Graham introduced them to the crowd, Jay felt a rush of emotions. He glanced at Aisha, who gave him a reassuring nod, and together they stepped forward to speak. "Thank you all for being here," Jay began, his voice steady. "When Aisha and I started this journey, we were just trying to buy our first home, but along the way, we realized that it was about so much more than that. It was about standing up against a system that tells people they don't belong based on someone else's prejudice." Aisha continued, her voice filled with conviction. "We know we weren't the only ones affected. We met so many of you, families and individuals who were steered away, discouraged, or made to feel that they didn't deserve a place in Willow Ridge. We're here to say that everyone deserves a fair chance, and we're grateful to stand with all of you to make this community truly inclusive." The crowd responded with applause, and as the meeting continued, a discussion unfolded about the future of Willow Ridge. People shared ideas for increasing transparency in real estate practices, promoting diversity in the neighborhood, and ensuring that discrimination would not be tolerated. The room was alive with a shared purpose, a collective determination to transform Willow Ridge into a place that welcomed everyone equally. Toward the end of the meeting, Matt and Layla, the young couple Jay and Aisha had met earlier, stood up to share their own story, thanking Jay and Aisha for giving them the courage to speak out. "We thought we'd lost our dream," Layla said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But you showed us that sometimes you have to fight for it. Thank you for standing up for all of us." As the meeting concluded, Mr. Graham took the floor once more, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Tonight we've witnessed something powerful, the strength of a community that's willing to grow, change, and stand together. Jay and Aisha, your courage has reminded us all of what it means to belong, and we're grateful to you for that." After the meeting, people approached Jay and Aisha to offer support, share stories, and express their commitment to change. They left the community center that evening, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude and connection. Willow Ridge was becoming the place they had always envisioned, a place of unity, warmth, and belonging. As they drove home in the quiet of the night, Aisha reached over and took Jay's hand, her eyes glistening with tears. "We did it, Jay. This place, it finally feels like home." Jay squeezed her hand, his own heart swelling with pride and relief. "It really does. And it's not just because of us. It's because of everyone who was willing to stand with us." They had come to Willow Ridge hoping to find a home, and what they found was something even greater. A community that embraced them, not in spite of their differences, but because of the shared values that bound them all. For Jay and Aisha, the journey had been worth every challenge, every sleepless night, and every moment of doubt. They had proven to themselves and to others that courage and unity could truly transform a place. In the weeks following the community meeting, Jay and Aisha began to notice small but powerful changes unfolding throughout Willow Ridge. The Housing Board's investigation into Ms. Veronica's practices continued, creating a ripple effect that seemed to touch every corner of the neighborhood. But it wasn't just the investigation that sparked transformation. The entire community was coming together to reshape what Willow Ridge represented. One of the first visible signs of change came in the form of new listings in the area. Realtors across Willow Ridge, perhaps wary of the scrutiny now placed on discriminatory practices, began showcasing homes more inclusively, reaching out to a broader range of prospective buyers. Jay and Aisha noticed more diverse families at open houses and a general shift in the way the real estate market presented the neighborhood. One Saturday morning, as they strolled through a nearby park, Aisha spotted a "for sale" sign in front of a charming cottage-style home that had caught her eye during their initial search. She turned to Jay, her face lighting up with excitement. "Jay, look, this is the one we wanted to see weeks ago. But remember, Ms. Veronica said it was unavailable." Aisha's eyes sparkled as she gazed at the house, remembering how it had felt just out of reach. Jay smiled, taking her hand. "Let's check it out. Maybe it's still available." They walked over, joining a small group of other potential buyers touring the home. Inside, they were welcomed by a friendly realtor who took the time to show them every feature and answered their questions with genuine enthusiasm. It was a refreshing change from the guarded, selective way Ms. Veronica had presented homes to them. Jay and Aisha felt seen, respected, and welcomed, feelings that had eluded them before. The cottage was everything they had hoped for: a cozy layout with sunlit rooms, a backyard perfect for gatherings, and just enough space to grow. As they explored each room, they exchanged glances filled with excitement, hardly daring to believe that this dream might finally become reality. After the tour, Jay and Aisha stepped outside, taking a moment to breathe in the fresh morning air. Standing on the lawn, they imagined a life here, filled with love, laughter, and all the memories they had dreamed of creating. "Do you think this is it, Jay?" Aisha asked softly, her voice tinged with emotion. Jay looked at her, his face breaking into a wide smile. "I think this might be the one, Aisha. It feels right." Buoyed by the warmth of the experience, they returned home, deciding to start the process of putting in an offer. This time they felt confident and empowered, knowing they had the support of a community that now shared their vision for a more inclusive Willow Ridge. A few days later, they received a call from the realtor handling the cottage. Her voice was bright and congratulatory. "Jay, Aisha, I have wonderful news. The seller has accepted your offer. Welcome to Willow Ridge." As the words sank in, Aisha felt tears well up in her eyes, and she turned to Jay, laughing through her emotions. They had done it. Against the odds, against the subtle barriers and whispered doubts, they had found their place. Willow Ridge, the community that had once felt like a distant dream, was now their home. Over the next few weeks, they settled into their new home, embracing every moment of decorating, arranging, and planning for the future. Neighbors began stopping by to introduce themselves, bringing small gifts and warm smiles that made them feel instantly at ease. There was a sense of camaraderie, a shared understanding that everyone in Willow Ridge had a part in building something meaningful and new. One evening, they invited Matt, Layla, and a few other friends over to celebrate the new chapter of their lives. As they gathered in the cozy living room, the house filled with laughter and the comforting sounds of friendship, Jay and Aisha felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "None of this would have been possible without all of you," Jay said, raising a glass in a heartfelt toast. "You gave us courage when we needed it most. Here's to a new beginning, not just for us, but for everyone who believed in making Willow Ridge a place where everyone belongs." The group raised their glasses, clinking them together in a moment of shared celebration. Aisha looked around, feeling the warmth of the people who had stood by them, who had become more than friends. They had become family. As they sat back, savoring the evening, Aisha reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the subtle exclusion they had faced to the powerful stand they had taken, every challenge had brought them closer to this moment, to this feeling of finally belonging. And as they sat together in the home they had worked so hard to claim, they knew that Willow Ridge was no longer just a neighborhood. It was a community that had opened its heart to them, embracing change, unity, and the belief that everyone deserved a place to call home. With each passing day, Jay and Aisha grew more settled in their new home. Willow Ridge had transformed from a dream into their reality, and they could feel themselves becoming part of the community in ways they had never anticipated. Every corner of the cottage held a story now. The kitchen where they shared quiet breakfasts, the living room where laughter echoed during late-night conversations, and the cozy back porch where they planned their future. As the weeks went by, Jay and Aisha began to establish routines, weaving themselves into the fabric of Willow Ridge. They joined local groups. Aisha volunteered at a community garden, tending to flowers and herbs with neighbors who quickly became friends, while Jay signed up for a local running club that met every Saturday morning. Their lives began to intertwine with those around them, creating a network of connections that added depth and joy to their new chapter. One afternoon, as Aisha was leaving the garden, she noticed a familiar face walking toward her. It was Mrs. Clark from the housing office, her warm smile lighting up as she approached. "Aisha, it's wonderful to see you here," Mrs. Clark greeted, her voice filled with genuine warmth. "I heard you and Jay finally moved into your home. How's everything going?" Aisha smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "It's everything we dreamed of, Mrs. Clark. Thank you for everything you did for us. We couldn't have done this without your support." Mrs. Clark waved a hand dismissively, her eyes twinkling. "You two did all the hard work. You inspired all of us to remember what this community should stand for." They chatted for a few more minutes, and Aisha felt an overwhelming sense of appreciation for the allies they had gained in their journey. Willow Ridge had become a place where they were surrounded by people who genuinely cared, who had rallied behind them in their fight and celebrated with them in their success. That evening, Jay and Aisha sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and pink. A gentle breeze rustled the trees, and they sat in companionable silence, each lost in their thoughts. After a while, Jay broke the silence. "It's strange, isn't it? When we first started this journey, I thought all we'd find was a house. But what we found is so much more than that." Aisha nodded, her eyes soft as she looked out over their backyard. "This place, it's more than we could have hoped for. We found a home, yes, but we also found a community, a family of sorts, people who stood by us, who believed in what we were trying to do." Jay took her hand, his thumb gently tracing circles on her skin. "I think that's what makes this place feel like home. It's not just the four walls or the yard. It's the people, the connections we've made. I wouldn't trade this for anything." As they sat together, a feeling of peace washed over them, a quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every struggle, every moment of doubt, every tear. They had not only claimed their place in Willow Ridge, but they had also helped create a legacy of inclusion and unity that would endure. In the days that followed, Jay and Aisha continued to deepen their roots. They attended neighborhood gatherings, hosted barbecues on warm evenings, and shared their story with those who were new to the area. They became advocates for change, helping others understand the importance of building a truly inclusive community, a place where everyone was welcome. One weekend, as they hosted a small gathering in their backyard, they realized how far they had come. Friends and neighbors laughed together, children ran through the yard, and a sense of unity filled the air. Jay watched Aisha chatting with Mrs. Clark and Layla, their laughter ringing out, and he felt a profound gratitude that this was their life, that these people had become their extended family. As the evening drew to a close, Aisha raised her glass, calling everyone's attention. "I just want to say thank you to each of you for welcoming us, for supporting us, and for standing with us. Willow Ridge is a better place because of all of you, and we're grateful to be a part of this community." The group raised their glasses, toasting to the journey that had brought them together. Jay and Aisha looked around, their hearts full as they took in the faces of the people who had become so much more than neighbors. They had come to Willow Ridge seeking a home, and in the process, they had discovered a community, a family, and a place where they truly belonged. Their journey had changed them, but more importantly, it had changed Willow Ridge, leaving a legacy of acceptance and love that would endure for years to come. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, Jay and Aisha held each other close, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. They had found everything they'd been searching for and more, and they knew that Willow Ridge was where they were meant to be, not just today, but for a lifetime. As summer turned to autumn, Jay and Aisha continued to thrive in Willow Ridge. The neighborhood had become more than just a place to live. It had become a source of joy, inspiration, and support. Their journey, which had begun with such uncertainty, had now blossomed into a life filled with meaningful relationships, a sense of purpose, and a feeling of true belonging. One afternoon, Jay and Aisha decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, admiring the vibrant colors of the changing leaves. The streets they had once viewed with a mixture of hope and trepidation now felt like home, each house and tree imbued with a familiarity that brought a smile to their faces. As they strolled along, they waved to neighbors, exchanging warm hellos with people who had become close friends. Mrs. Clark was tending her garden, and she looked up with a wave and a knowing smile as they passed. The local baker, a cheerful woman named Maria, greeted them as they neared her shop, insisting they stop in for a sample of her latest pumpkin spice scones. Inside the bakery, the rich scent of spices filled the air, and Aisha's eyes lit up as she took a bite of the warm scone. "This is amazing, Maria. You're going to have to give me the recipe," she teased, knowing the baker guarded her secrets closely. Maria laughed, handing Jay another scone. "You know I never share my recipes, but as long as you're here in Willow Ridge, you'll always have a taste of the best." As they left the bakery, Jay wrapped his arm around Aisha's shoulders, pulling her close. "It's strange, isn't it? How at home we feel now. It's hard to imagine that we once felt like outsiders here." Aisha nodded, her gaze softening as she looked at him. "We've come a long way, and it wasn't just us. The whole community has changed. People are more open, more welcoming. It's like Willow Ridge has grown along with us." They continued their walk, reflecting on the moments that had shaped their journey. They remembered the challenges they had faced, the strength they had found within each other, and the allies who had supported them when they needed it most. Each step they had taken had brought them closer to the life they had dreamed of, one filled with acceptance, friendship, and love. As they reached the edge of a small park, Jay and Aisha sat down on a bench, watching children play and families enjoy the crisp autumn air. A sense of peace settled over them, and they sat in companionable silence, soaking in the beauty of the moment. After a while, Aisha spoke, her voice thoughtful. "It's funny, you know. I used to think a home was just a place, four walls, a roof, but it's so much more than that. It's the people, the memories, the feeling of knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. Jay squeezed her hand, nodding in agreement. I feel the same way. We built something here that no one can take away from us. We're part of Willow Ridge now, and it's part of us. They shared a quiet smile, both of them filled with gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. From the initial struggles to the moments of triumph, each experience had shaped them, deepened their love for each other, and strengthened their belief in the power of community. As they sat together, Jay and Aisha realized that their story wasn't just about buying a house. It was about finding a place where they could be themselves, a place where they could build a life rooted in love, resilience, and acceptance. And in doing so, they had helped create a legacy that would inspire others for years to come. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over Willow Ridge, and Jay and Aisha knew that this was only the beginning. They had found their home, not just in the physical sense, but in the hearts of the people around them. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that they would continue to grow, to learn, and to build a life filled with the beauty of community and connection. The first anniversary of their move into Willow Ridge was approaching, and Jay and Aisha decided to celebrate the milestone with a small gathering of friends and neighbors who had been part of their journey. It felt fitting to mark the occasion surrounded by the people who had helped make Willow Ridge feel like home. As they prepared for the gathering, Aisha was struck by how different life had become over the past year. She recalled the uncertainty and frustration they had faced in the beginning, wondering if they would ever truly belong. Now, as she arranged a centerpiece on the table and filled the house with the comforting aroma of homemade food, she realized that Willow Ridge had become more than just a place. It was a reflection of the journey she and Jay had taken together. On the day of the celebration, guests began to arrive in the late afternoon, filling their cozy home with laughter and warmth. Familiar faces, Mrs. Clark, Matt and Layla, Maria from the bakery, Mr. Graham and other friends, filled the space, each bringing a sense of joy and unity. The evening was filled with shared stories, warm embraces, and heartfelt toasts to new friendships and fresh starts. As the night wore on, Jay gathered everyone's attention, his face lit up with gratitude. Aisha and I just want to thank each of you for being here tonight, and for everything you've done for us this past year. We came to Willow Ridge looking for a house, but we found so much more than that. We found a family. Aisha took his hand, her eyes shining as she continued. You all have shown us what it means to belong, to fight for what's right, and to welcome others with open hearts. We're grateful for every one of you. This home is ours, but Willow Ridge is all of ours. We're building something beautiful together. The room erupted in applause, and their friends raised glasses in a toast, celebrating the journey that had brought them all together. Jay and Aisha looked around, their hearts full as they took in the faces of the people who had supported them, stood by them, and become part of their lives. As the evening began to wind down, Mr. Graham approached them, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, he said, you two have done more than find a home here. You've inspired this community to grow, to look inward, and to become a better version of itself. Willow Ridge is a better place because of you. Jay and Aisha felt a swell of emotion, humbled by his words. They knew they had set out with a simple dream, but the journey had become so much more than they could have ever imagined. After the last guests had left, Jay and Aisha sat together in the quiet of their home, reflecting on the evening and the journey that had brought them here. They had created something lasting, something meaningful, a legacy of inclusion, resilience, and the belief that everyone deserves a place to belong. As they sat side by side, Aisha leaned her head on Jay's shoulder, a peaceful smile on her face. We did it, Jay. We found our home. Jay wrapped an arm around her, his heart full. Yes, we did. And it feels like only the beginning. Their hearts intertwined, Jay and Aisha looked forward to the future with a shared sense of purpose. Together, they had turned a house into a home, and they had made Willow Ridge a place where dreams and community flourished side by side.